It acted on a false rumor spread at the village temple that Seifi had eaten beef. Dismayed by what he perceives to be the deafening silence and inaction of the government in the face of these atrocities, 74-year-old Ashokji, one of India's most acclaimed literary figures, joined other celebrated authors in protest by returning his award from India's National Academy of Letters, the Sahitya Academy. To date, in a massive show of solidarity, dozens of members of this elite body have returned their prizes. Nirmala George writes in the Globe and Mail in an article published a week ago today, quote, "India's literary community is disgusting. Dozens of writers say every day brings more evidence of intolerance and bigotry going mainstream," unquote. Similar notices have appeared in the New York Times, the BBC, and across South Asian media. In a moving essay published 11 days ago in the English language daily, The Hindu, Ashokji wrote, quote, "We are extremely worried by the way the India polity is moving. All spaces of liberal values and thought, all locations of dissent and dialogue, all attempts at sanity and mutual trust are under assault almost on a daily basis. All kinds and forms of violence, whether religious and communal, consumerist and globalizing, caste-based and cultural, social and domestic, are on the upswing," unquote. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, we will begin our program, Shattering the Silence, India's Authors Protest Recent Murders. Please join me in giving a rousing UTM welcome to the courageous Shri UTM Vajpeyi.
Friends, I'm deeply touched by the fact that so many of you are here this evening. I'm reminded of a Polish poet whom I had the occasion to translate, and who, according to me, should have got the Nobel, but didn't, Zbigniew Herbert. When he wrote a line, it was not a matter of courage, it was a matter of taste. So I don't know whether one is being very courageous in doing what one is doing. Writers are lonely people in the sense that they sit in their lonesome parlors or chambers or rooms and write and hope that others will have the occasion to react, to respond, to feel the sense of reality that they put forth. And you never know whether this happens or doesn't happen. But there are occasions when writers have to become the voice of conscience. Nobody has appointed them. They are self-appointed in a certain sense. Nobody, but people, and I was quite surprised, when only 3 of us, to start with, had announced our award, that now the figure is growing by the day. And obviously, the creative and intellectual community of India is greatly agitated over what is happening. It's not simply a murder here or an act of violence there. It seems to be a very well-designed pattern which is emerging. In the first place, many of the national institutions are being devalued, marginalized. People are being appointed to positions which they don't deserve by the merit of their talent, whatever little they have. And, for instance, the National Book Trust now has a chairman who belongs to the same state where I come from, Madhya Pradesh, and he allegedly was a journalist there. I never heard of him, and I don't think he has ever written a book. he is the chairman of the National Book Trust. And similarly, the Lalit Kala Academy has been superseded on very flimsy grounds. It has already been mentioned that three intellectuals, two of them intellectuals, one of them a self-professed rationalist, have been murdered in daylight, broad daylight, and none of their killers have been so far apprehended. And the latest was, of course, which provoked us all, was this man who belonged to a minority community. And a rumor was spread that he had a piece of beef in his house, and he was lynched to death. And his son remains in a critical condition. And this is happening only 100 miles away, less than 100 miles away perhaps, from this national capital. The idea that you belong to a minority, whether it is of faith and religion, whether it is of opinion and belief, whether it is a minority opinion on anything, you are ab initio under doubt, under suspicion. So ultimately writers themselves are a minority. Everywhere in the world, in all countries, writers are a minority. But they exist because they are a minority who have a right to exist. Now you are being told that you should say, you are being told you should say this, you should not say this. You should eat this, you should not eat this. You should not dream this, you should dream this. It's the state which is exceeding its limits. So it's a very disturbing situation. This country, my country, has been a civilizational enterprise. India is not merely a country or a nation in the usual sense. It is also a civilization. It is also one of the few civilizations that have survived in the world. And it has survived and existed, it sustained itself, transformed itself into a living dynamism through plurality. It is the plurality of India which has sustained itself through millennia. And nothing in India, in fact I am very fond of saying, nothing in India is allowed to be singular for a long while. Everything singular turns into plural. Whether God, religion, language, costume, cuisine, custom, all fields there is plurality. And this plurality has been achieved not merely by a particular religion, a particular kind of people or race. It has been contributed to by everybody who has been in India. So you cannot think of India without its minorities, for instance. After all, as against Hinduism, Buddhism was a minority religion, Jainism was a minority religion, Sikhism was a minority religion, and although Islam came to us about 1,000 years ago or more, it has been a minority religion. The Christians are a minority. So almost every other religion is a minority. But that doesn't mean that one can take the civilizational enterprise and convert it into a tyranny of uniformity. What is happening, and this is not merely in the field of social behavior or polity, it is also happening in the academic circles. The central universities, for instance, which are being forced into having a uniform syllabus throughout the country. So there are 40 odd central universities, they will have the same syllabus. And the ground is what? Each university has its own history and its own scholarship traditions and things of that kind. And they develop a certain kind of approach to studies and things like that. And they are not allowed that freedom. They will not be allowed that freedom. This is only on the anvil. Historians, we have some very eminent historians. Some of them happen to be also left historians, Marxist historians. And they are now all being denigrated on the ground that they have misinterpreted history. Now, who the deuce is going to decide that this is misinterpretation? You have one interpretation of history. Even in the best heydays of the national movement, there were two kinds of interpretations of Indian history. One was by British colonial historians, and the other one was by the nationalist historians. Both coexisted, and finally they elbowed each other out in some sense. So in the realm of a scholarship, or in the realm of history, or things of that kind, you cannot say that the state view has to be taken into account. Actually, the state has no role to play. It has to provide the wherewithal so that free inquiry can take place. It has to provide wherewithals and resources so that the world of imagination and intellect and ideas works and develops on its own, having its own autonomy. And there is nothing to show that any of them, these historians, have been disloyal to the so-called idea of India. The battle at the moment is between two ideas of India. The idea of India, which had come to it from its own traditions and from the experience of democracy in the last 60, 70 years, that idea of India has plurality,